So today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to discuss something, a book that would help support the whole general idea of Course in Miracles. So parts of this you're going to have to kind of just take my word for. If you want a better explanation of what I'm going to give right now, I recommend that you go to my other channel. There's a really good explanation about especially certain elements of this picture. So the square and the circle, it's a its symbolic nature and throughout history. Uh, I'd recommend that you go there because it's a little too indirect to talk about too much on here, but I go over it quite well, and I'll link it in the comments, not in the comments, but underneath the video there, I guess in the description area. I'll link it there, and then you guys can get a better grasp on all of this. So, what we're going to talk about here is a very good book. It's Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. So this is Dostoevsky here. So how this supports the Course in Miracles, I'll explain here in a moment. So Dostoevsky's book centers around a father and three sons, and these are the three sons here, and I've represented them all as different shapes. And these are not random shapes either, so there's a lot that we can talk about here, but I'm going to try to see if I'm just going to kind of wing it here and hope this turns out okay, but I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to explain this. So he has this father named Fedor Karamazov, and he has these three boys, and the oldest one being Dmitri. Dmitri was from a different mother than these two were, Ivan and Alyosha. And Dmitri is what they call a sensualist. So he enjoys everything that is in the world. He is an army lieutenant, I think a lieutenant anyway, I'm not sure about that. But he drinks a lot, he philanders a lot, he's very interested in women and fun and blowing money as fast as he can, especially his father's money. And he hates his father quite intensely, and it can be said to a certain degree that both of these kind of have at least some negative feelings towards their father and the whole town in general. His father being a sort of wealthy person that is not well thought of is there, and everybody kind of thinks of him somewhat negatively. So Ivan, in contrast to Dmitri, is a very rational, logical person, and he's very well thought of. We'll just put like logical, new era kind of person. So this happens in the 19th century of Russia, and just before like the communist overtake during the subsequent next 30 years or so, and you can really see the field of ideology that is around at that time, and they're kind of switching from one to the other. So they were the church played a bigger part in the past, and then now this logical European ideas are coming in, and Ivan is a big proponent of them. And Dmitri, not really. Dmitri's actually more oriented this way. So the one brother, the youngest brother, his name is Alyosha, and Alyosha goes to seminary, training young men to come in the priesthood, and there's a specific elder he's a very big fan of, and he wants to follow in his footsteps. Kind of plays the father role for him. And Alyosha is very determined on going to a higher realm, kind of. He wants to serve a higher realm, I guess I should say. So he's trying to do that. There's another kid in his seminary named Rakitin, and Rakitin's kind of the opposite. So just like the brothers are kind of opposites, or at least embody different elements of our sort of psyche, collective psyche, Rakitin is the opposite of Alyosha. He cares a lot about what's happening on Earth and trying to place himself in situations where he'll benefit from earthly things that are happening. So he's making money off writing stories and doing sort of tabloid type writing ventures where he kind of slanders people within the town and everything else. So if we look at these shapes, uh, I feel like I should explain this a little bit more. But if we look at these shapes, the square is a shape that's usually associated with rationality. So, I mean, you can talk about some different movements in the 60s and 70s where they called rationality square. You're a bunch of squares. And this is something that we can see symbolism in many other different things here. I'll explain those in a moment. And then the sensualists, the ones that are looking for an overall impression, sort of want to see love and beauty in the world and want to experience emotionally more than they want to rationally understand things. That's represented by Dmitri. And we see a lot of this in symbolism throughout time. This, when I put it together, is going to be what we talked about in one of my previous videos. It's going to be the Incan cross. And we'll talk about that in a sec. But for now, we'll just talk about some of these other shapes up here. So this circle, with the bigger circle and the smaller circle in the center and the square and the triangle, this is supposed to represent the Philosopher's Stone. So Philosopher's Stone representing the sort of perfect form. Jeez. Philosopher's Stone is representing a sort of perfect form where everything is put together in its original orientation. And we have the circle and the square and the triangle and everything else. And I'll explain that a little bit more later. We have another one here with Rebus, and we have a sort of androgynous character. So we often talked about what we've talked about so far as being the world being this split up perfect light that comes in, and the different elements of it are split in the world. So we have the feminine form. Here we have it holding a square, so for making squares, and we have the masculine form. So this is from alchemy too. So the Philosopher's Stone is from alchemy. This is from alchemy. And we have the differentiating elements that are sort of seen as binary, so like the sun and the moon. And then we have the circle, maybe holding the compass here, so for making these sides. And then we see the respective shapes in this circle on the bottom that is flying. And I could talk about this a lot, but for now, this is all we'll talk about. We see, of course, the Masons, and there's more shapes I can throw into this. There's lots of evidence. There's lots of different pictures and engravings throughout time that kind of go to a lot of these same symbolisms. But then we have the square on the bottom here with the Masons and the all-seeing eye in the center. So let's show how this works. So if we put all these together, whether it goes up or whether it goes down. So the shape, remember we said that circle in the center is supposed to be going between the layers of existence. So there's sort of this triangle layer of existence which is oriented towards going up. So I think this is sort of a spiritual sort of symbolism. And then they have the circle, and there's no rhyme or reason to which one's going atop each other here. And I've never really thought about that enough to really make a stance, but just know that they're all nested together. The circle being below, well, or being in there too, I should just say. So representing, in this picture, this would be representing the way it's supposed to be. So we have the sensual and the rationality represented by the square here, and then we have the cardinal directions in the outskirts of it too. So this represents, we were just talking about how in the last one, how our family members often represent parts of our psyche and how we reproduce these parts of our psyche. And I feel like people in general have said, in historic times, not so much lately, that you should always honor the father and always honor your mother. And I think part of that is because we've talked about now a little bit that the world is in effect. And if you're honoring your mother and your father and you keep that idea in your mind, they'll live up to that honor. And it's not a rational thing. You can't look at the world and find that it's the way it's supposed to be guiding you towards these sort of higher elevated statuses towards them. You really have to start in your own mind. And I think since your mother and your father might represent sort of the mother principle and the father principle and everything, your relationship to them should be represented or should be thought of in your own psyche as always positive, even when they've done terrible things, even when they've been wrong, or they've maybe did things that you feel like have hurt you in your past. Always honor them, no matter what. And you'll find that they'll eventually, and I've heard lots of people talk about this, where they just started praying for their father or their mother, and even though they had a bad relationship with them, and it just miraculously improved. And this would make sense if we think of the world, as we were discussing, as a projection, and we have to clear our mind of these preconceived notions that they're what they are is what they've done in the past. They will be what you want them to be, as long as you keep your mind free of what they should be, and you keep your mind free of fear. So a way to think of this is, if this is, we talked about this being the layers that you go through, if we think of this as going in between the layers, if you're looking at the world, you'll find the classical. So sorry, I should mention this before. The square is thought of as the classical, and some people, when they talk about it, so let's put a square up there. That's a kind of confusing way to show you. And the romantic is supposed to be the circular side. So we vacillate between these two extremes, but are really both part of our psyche. But one is one that we kind of side with or the other. And then we're going in a direction. So we go between these two opposites, so thesis, antithesis, and then in between, if we're going towards the ground, it becomes lysis. And lysis means like dissipation, gone. Like it in biology, it's just when something just sort of disappears, goes into nothingness. So you could think of like this being hot, this being cold, and you put it to the center, it's just water. It's just lukewarm water. There's nothing really changing here. It's just like the two extremes balance each other. And that's when you're worried about the world, is this, it's all illusion. So when you take the two opposites, it just becomes nothing between them. There was the difference before, but it was only a difference that was balanced out by the other side, so the yin and yang. Now I think the difference of that and the a priori, the thing that was before, and the evidence that we need for the a priori, is when it does this, when it goes up and it becomes synthesis. So when these two sides correspond going upward, it becomes one truth. And that one truth is the real truth. And the philosophers often talk about this as a priori. So the truth before the world began, kind of thing. And this is this teleological view of the world representing something that is not perfect. But I feel like the brothers Karamazov is kind of trying to allude to this. And Alyosha was always in every situation was making a positive contribution, and Rakitin was always making a negative contribution to the situation. So this is disassociating things. This is centripetal. Centripetal, and then Alyosha, his influence was always centrifugal. So everything coming together, making it one. And this is what the course will eventually do. It'll be the influence in your life that makes things one, makes a synthesis, and you'll realize the truth in that synthesis at the top of this triangle, which is more of a looking up rather than being up. So if you try to raise yourself, you're trying to elevate yourself above others, keep yourself centered. This is, I think, why in our speak we often talk about centering ourselves. So it's right in the heart of this. But anyway, this is kind of a random divergence. So if you like it and want me to do more of this kind of stuff, please let me know, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.